Wait. Let her speak. I took them for my boy. We will not let a mother choose between shame and a child's breath.
Marta dropped her basket when she saw the bronze charm split on the threshold. The charm lay on the straw, its cord torn, the knot undone by force or by rough hands. Suspicion tightened her shoulders. She swept her palm over the threshold and found fresh scraping marks in the dried straw. A neighbor's door stood half lit across the lane. Marta called, voice short. "Who comes at this hour?" She stepped inside, hands clenching the rim of her basket, and the household lights smelled of tallow and wet leather. Within that first walk across her doorframe, the problem stood clear. Small protections were failing where they had always held. Marta moved from the threshold into the low room with a practiced steadiness. She set the basket on the bench, hooked her thumb under the worn leather apron, and looked for a quick, practical fix. Her fingers searched the broken charm, found the bronze pendant cool from the night air, and then went to the little pouch by the hearth where thread and wax were kept. She threaded new cord, measured twice, and then stopped. Suspicion pushed her out of the cottage again. She tied the new charm but did not hang it. She crossed the lane to check the other doorways, lamp stub held close to shield the flame from the late wind. Down the lane she found the same trouble. A thin coil of cord lay near Master Jern's latch, a reed charm dangled, malformed. Tom ran up from the cooper's yard with a cloth bundle slung over his shoulder. His breath came quick in the cold air. "Marta, Tom, there are tracks by the smith's shed. Mud and small feet." He did not smile. He looked like a boy who had learned watchfulness faster than play. Brother Alden appeared below the eaves, oil lamp in hand and rosary tucked in his sleeve. He set the lamp on a stone and peered at the charms, then at the marks on the thresholds. He moved his fingers over the grain of a door and touched the dent of a notch. "If false charms are taken, Brother Alden, we must decide who and why." His voice had the careful pace of his prayers. He the words of the problem plainly. Protections taken from doors not broken by wind, and footprints that trailed inward and then away. They examined the lane together. Marta knelt by a threshold, lifting a scrap of straw to see the scrape beneath. Tom crouched opposite. Brother Alden traced a muddy heel with his finger and frowned. Outside, two other neighbors peered from their cottages and then came out to stand shoulder to shoulder. People gathered as one habit. A murmur of wooden sandals across cobble, the clunk of a shutter closing. The immediate stakes were clear. The charms had been moved and someone in the lane had reasons that were not yet known. Marta's suspicion shifted to worry when she noticed a second, different mark under a lintel. A notch carved small and neat, the sort craftspeople used to hang a special peg. The notch was fresh, the wood still slightly rough under fingertip. That difference altered the pattern in Marta's mind. This was not only a thief hunting goods. Someone had used knowledge of doors and pegs. She straightened and said, "Someone knows our thresholds. Someone knows where charms are kept." Her voice did not shake, but she held the lamp tighter. They moved as a unit to the longhouse, where the village kept a long bench and a single, broad hearth. The longhouse smelled of boiled grain and wet wool. Villagers took up space around the hearth in pairs and small groups, bodies close to share warmth. Marta took a seat with her basket between her knees. She set the new charm on the bench, face up, as if to show the craft of it. Brother Alden put his lamp on the central beam and traced a ring of light that made every face look the same, edges warm, eyes set to listen. Voices rose and fell in practical bursts. "Prayer will not guard doors that men open," said Ein, the shoemaker, salt on the top of his voice. "We need locks," said another. "We need watch rotas," suggested a woman with a child shawl dragged over her shoulders. Marta listened and kept her own plan unspoken. She had spent years patching leather and reinforcing straps. She thought in terms of stitches and knots. Her mind worked on reinforcing thresholds with little iron nails and extra cord, but Brother Alden argued for a schedule of prayers and watches. The disagreement was quiet at first, then sharpened by fear. The argument moved fast into a short exchange that showed the fracture. Brother Alden, martyr, a charm takes a hand to break, but a lock takes hands to open. We can hammer nails, we can keep watch. The child will be warm if they can stay inside. Alden set his rosary on the bench and pressed his thumb to one bead. Martyr, a watch is an arm of safety. Prayer steadies the watch. If we name the danger now, we face it. If we only strike nails, we punish those who are hungry. Ein snapped back. Do you mean we hang them by the neck? The back and forth flattened into 3 quick lines. Martyr, Alden, Ein. Each line was a hand on a problem. The villagers split into 2 efforts by choice and habit. Some gathered materials, iron nails, extra cord, a spare lock from the granary left unused last autumn. Others stood to sign the watch roster that Brother Alden scribbled on a scrap. Tom offered to sleep in the cooper's workshop. He spoke quickly and with a boy's bluntness. I can keep the lamp at the bench. Tom, I can listen. He wanted to belong to the solution. Brother Alden nodded and laid a small, careful hand on Tom's shoulder. Martha watched him and, for a moment, felt the suspicion in her chest ease toward a plan. That night Tom carried his sleeping bundle into the cooper's yard and set a small lamp on a low shelf. The workshop smelled of sap and old tools. Tom spread his cloth on a pile of shavings and laid his head on his folded arm. He kept one eye on the door, the lamp a smear of gold in the dark. He himself the lamp was enough, and that the sound of his breathing would not betray him. The first external event after the argument came when a distant scrape sounded from the back alley late in the night. Tom froze. He listened. The scrape came again, soft, like a stone moved along the side of a wall. He rose without a sound and reached for his small knife. He moved toward the door, lamp held low. His steps were careful on the packed earth. He pushed the door open and slipped into the chill. Tom followed the scrape into the alley and found a set of footprints leading to a neighbor's back door. The prints were small and muddied. They led to a beam where someone had rubbed a notch clean. Tom crouched and watched the way the boot heel hit the stone. He saw marks consistent with someone carrying a child or a bundle. He stood and, without calling, rode the trail until it stopped at a low fence, then vanished into the field beyond. He blinked, the lamp flame making his shadow long, and then ran back to the workshop carrying a narrow piece of carved wood he had picked up near the beam. The carved wood had been wedged under a beam and was not part of a charm. Tom brought it to Brother Alden and Martha. He laid the wedge on the hearthstone. Martha traced her fingers along its edge. It had been used to lift a latch from inside and then slipped back into the beam. The evidence changed the tone in the room. Suspicion sharpened into the sense of an inside problem. People shifted in their benches. At once the village decided to investigate closer. Martha and Tom, with Brother Alden beside them, went to question the neighbor who lived near the beam. The neighbor, Maren, answered the knock with a face pale and hands still smelling of broth. She opened the door and did not shut it when they asked to come in. Tom's short sentences were steady. Maren, did you take charms? No, Maren, I would not take them. Who would do such a thing? Martha saw the woman's hands. They trembled when she lifted the kettle from the hearth. She could smell the broth and the wool of the child's blanket at the foot of the bed. The room had the tight warmth of a house bending to keep someone alive. Martha watched Maren more than she listened. There was a hush as Maren wiped her hands on her apron. Brother Alden watched the child, who coughed once and then turned away. Tom shifted his weight. The crowd outside pressed near the doorway like a tide. Then Ein, the shoemaker, said plainly, "Tell them what we found, Tom. Tell them why the charms were moved." Tom's voice was small but clear. "I followed prints. I found a notch and a wedge. I found a charm hung inside the hedgerow near the stream. The prints looked like they came in the night, then back out. The moment tightened further. Confrontation grew sharp and quick. The villagers formed a ring. Marta stood by the hearth with Brother Alden, Tom at her elbow, and Marin at the center. Someone hissed that thieves had been seen. Another cried that a curse might have been done. Voices rose. Who takes charms? One woman demanded, who would let a child die to keep some superstition. Marin's face fell. She set her jaw and then said simply, I took them. I took them so my boy's scent would not call cold to this house. The confession landed like a stone. Silence hit the room in the shape of a held breath. The chorus of questions came in quick, clipped lines. Marta, you heard her. Brother Alden, what do you say? Tom, did you see more? The dialogue came fast and sharp. 3 to 6 lines of quick exchange, where the villagers pushed and pressed and demanded clarity. Marin's voice broke, but she kept speaking. He coughs like a bell. He shivers at the edge of sleep. I could not feed him and see him lie like that. I took the charm so his scent would not drive the cold out, and so he might sleep next to the warmer bed. I did not mean to steal what belongs to the lane. I meant to move small things so my son would not be turned out. She dropped her hands to her sides, fingers white around the edge of her apron. Marta felt a shift then, the second emotional change. Suspicion to fear to a softening that edged toward compassion. She remembered nights when her own babes had been thin, and the long months of leather work that paid for bread. She looked at Marin's child, small and pressed under wool, and saw the honest smallness of a mother's fear. Marta's hands tightened on the new charm on the bench. Her mind moved to action rather than to complaint. Brother Alden stepped forward, rosary beads leaving a faint dust on his thumb. He quietly, Marin, why did you not come and ask? Marin's shoulders jerked. I could not. It was shame and cold both. I thought I could hide it. I thought the charms would not be missed if I returned them in time. Ian's face reddened. He wanted the law of the lane and the certainty of punishment. We cannot have stealing, Ian, not over superstition. Not for food, Marta interrupted, low and practical. Then we will not let a mother choose between shame and a child's breath. We will make a plan that does not leave her to choose alone. Her words cut the argument short, but they did not resolve the anger. The villagers argued for a moment longer in quick bursts. Some there must be punishment. Some help must be offered. Tom spoke up. We can share beds and straw tonight. I will keep the lamp by the Cooper's bed. Brother Alden can make the roster smaller so a single watch does not wear the men out. Marta can teach how to fasten doors so they do not need charms. He spoke with the blunt bravery of youth who wants the present danger addressed. Marta nodded. Action now felt like the right answer. They arranged it then, without ceremony. The Longhouse would accept Marin's family for a few nights. They would share straw and blankets. Marta would bring leather and nails before dawn to fasten thresholds where needed. Brother Alden rewrote the roster so that pairs watched in shifts rather than single men in the cold, and he promised to bring extra broth from the priory. The change in plans moved the mood in concrete ways. A handful of benches were cleared, a pot was placed on the hearth, and 3 men went outside to fetch more straw. An external event broke into the middle of the arrangement. A faint scrape sounded again outside, near the Cooper's yard. Tom froze with a lad's start, then steadied. He put his hand on the lamp and held it so the flame would not gutter. Marta crossed to the window and peered into the lane. The scrape was distant, but it made every muscle in the room alert. It was the mini cliffhanger of the night. Listeners would lean in. Tom rose and took a lamp from the bench. He went to the Cooper's workshop and set it by the straw bed where he would sit watch. He kept the lamp low and listened for footsteps. He did not sleep with that easy slide of boyhood into unconsciousness. He kept his knife near his palm and hummed a small tune that he had learned while whittling. Marta returned with nails and a wooden wedge. She worked at the thresholds with quick, practical hands, driving nails that made a tiny ring of metal sound on the wood. Each strike was an answer to fear. As dawn rose, the village had reordered itself. The new arrangements were visible in small things. A spare latch on Marin's door, a small lock on the cooper's back door, a roster with names written in Brother Alden's careful hand. The confession had changed the village's choices. The tension settled into a new tiredness that smelled of hot broth and wet wool. People moved with less heat in their voices and more attention in their hands. The final beats of the chapter tied up the immediate conflict in concrete acts. Brother Alden offered a humbler blessing that mixed prayer with instructions about the watch. He spoke the words of a brief prayer, then named the first 2 watchers by name. Marta taught Marin how to hammer a nail in a way that would hold a charm behind a small iron plate. Tom kept the lamp by the straw and listened through a stretch of time when the scrape sounded one last time, but did not come near. The village decided, by small decisions and shared work, that punishment alone would not keep them warm. Marta left the longhouse at dawn with the new charm looped in her apron and a spare wedge tucked into her hand. She walked past closed doors and saw the small evidence of change: a latch, a tied bundle, a bowl left half full for any who needed food. She passed Tom at the cooperess and nodded. Tom's hand rested on his lamp as if to make a promise. Brother Alden walked behind them, his rosary tapping softly against his side. The lane smelled of damp straw and morning bread. The choices had been made, and the village had rearranged itself around them. Early that morning, as light thinned the last of the mist, Marta placed the new charm over her own threshold, and then hooked a spare behind a loose board where any neighbor could fetch it without shame. She left the knot untied, so that whoever took it could open the string and feel the warmth of a familiar cord. She did not speak of the argument or of the confession. She only set the charm where hands could reach it, and walked away to gather leather and thread for the next day's work. The scene closed on a clear motion. Marta moving forward with tools in hand and the village tightened by small, practical choices made under lamplight. The chapter ends with Tom lifting the lamp from the cooper's shelf and setting it near his straw bed as he settles in for the first watch. He breathes slowly, the lamp flame steady at his fingertips, and he listens for the scrape that did not come. His small action, holding the light, becomes the concrete beat that closes the chapter. Emotion root, suspicion. Emotion shifts, suspicion, fear, compassion. Suspicion, worry, practical resolve. Tom woke to the sound of straw rubbing under a heavy sole and a sudden, small brightness of fear. Suspicion hit him first. The back threshold had been forced and something small lay split on the wet straw. He fishing for the lamp by hand, knocking it over once before he steadied the flame, and the lamp trembled in his palm as he pulled the charm free. The bronze pendant was cracked through its loop, its cord frayed as if cut rather than worn. He called out, voice thin, Marta, and then louder, Marta! Tom the cooper's apprentice lived in the rear of the workshop and kept his sleeping bundle rolled beneath a rafter. He left the lamp on the workbench and crouched, fingers turning the broken charm over. The metal smelled faintly of leather and peat smoke. He knew the charm, the same small bronze charm Marta wore at her throat, because he had seen her tie a new one for Elspeth's child weeks ago. The earlier theft at Marta's threshold had been whispered in the lane. Now the theft felt deliberate and close. Suspicion pulled at Tom's shoulders. He tightened his grip on the charm and rose to the door. He pushed into the lane and found wet straw scattered by footprints that ran from his threshold away toward the mill road. The scrape marks were clear near his own threshold, where the straw had been pushed aside in one rough motion. Tom followed the marks with short steps, lamp held low so the flame did not give him away. He kept thinking of Marta's hands that afternoon, of the bronze charm she had dropped and found split on the threshold. He moved faster when he heard a voice behind him, Tom. Brother Alden's voice came from the lane, soft and even. Alden was not one to rise without need. He carried a small lamp of his own and the rope of his rosary. "What is it?" he asked, and his eyes went to the straw and to the charm in Tom's hand. Tom showed the charm without speaking. Again, Alden, and his fingers tightened on his lamp. "Marta, me her charm split last week. This is one of hers." He knelt, checking the scrape marks with a walking stick, pressing at the damp straw. He tapped the ground with the stick as if measuring the way the footprints led. Tom's voice was quick. "Someone came here. They took from her, then came for mine. Who would take charms?" His jaw worked. He pushed his thumb into the cracked rim of the pendant. Suspicion hardened into a decision. He would wake Marta, and they would gather neighbors. They found Marta at her hearth, hands in a woolen apron, darning a strap by lamplight. Her face had the small scar along the jaw that Tom could map in the lamp's circle. Her hands moved without trembling. She rose when Tom held out the broken charm. "Marta, Tom, another one. At my back door." He kept his sentences short. Alden stepped forward and stretched out the rosary beads on the table. Marta's mouth worked around the news. She tasted the charred edge of the lamp smoke before she spoke. "Ivy kept the rest tied in a pouch," she said. "If someone takes them, they leave a smaller ruin in the doorway. We repair, we replace. But this looks cut, not weak cord. Cut." She set the needle down and touched the split bronze with a fingertip. Alden looked to Tom. "Tom, did you see any footprints beyond the lane?" he asked. Tom pointed toward the mill road, and Alden traced the path with his finger as he spoke. "We should speak with neighbors. We should keep watch in turns." The word watch landed like a stone. It made the room feel smaller and purposeful. They moved through the cottages, knocking on doors that opened to faces turned pale in the lamplight. Neighbors clustered in doorways, coats wrapped tight. Marta for every charm to be brought to the hearth, and one by one the small bronze discs appeared on the table. Whole, split, some with knots soiled with earth. A neighbor, Brant the baker, handed his over and spoke in a low voice. "My wife swore she heard a child last night, but no sound came when she opened the door." She found the straw disturbed, his hands clenched around the charm. A woman placed a charm on the table without looking up. "Elspeth's child has been ill," she said, voice small. "She keeps asking for the old blessed cords." "I thought she might have asked of travelers." The room tightened. Talk moved fast in short sentences. Murmurs began to grow. Marta's brows pinched. "Did anyone see who passed by the mill?" She asked. "Did anyone see a wick out on the road?" Alden replied, "We will watch. We will not accuse until we know." The neighbors did not look convinced. One man leaned forward and said, "It might be that laborer who returned last week. He looks like a stranger now. He keeps his eyes down." Another voice answered with a counter, "Or worse. Someone among us who thinks charms mean easy wealth." The accusation landed and Tom felt his chest tighten. He answered quickly, "Don't point to faces without proof." His words were blunt and kept short. Others started back and then spoke over one another. Alden raised a hand and said, "We will not turn on each other. We will keep watch instead." The word watch again moved like a small relief through the group. Marta took a scrap of cord from the pouch at her waist and began to stitch new loops into the broken charms. Her hands worked steady, each pass of needle a small promise. "We bind them tighter," she said, eyes on the cord. "We tie stronger knots and hang them higher. We keep a lamp at the threshold." Her voice was practical and calm. An argument opened when Brant accused a returning laborer by name. Rapid lines threw names back and forth. "He came late, Brant. He had mud on his boots. He is hungry," someone else answered. "He eyed the charms," Brant snapped. "Brant, that is not proof." "Alden, then what is proof?" "Brant, the exchange had the quick back and fourth edge required." It stopped when Marta placed both hands flat on the table. "Enough," she said. "We checked the lane. We watch tonight in pairs." She looked to Tom. "You will sleep at the workshop beyond the door." "Keep your lamp low," he nodded. They arranged watches in short turns. Tom took the first stretch by the cooper's forge, his lamp set low on the bench. He rolled his bundle into sleep position but did not sleep. Instead he listened to the lane. Every sound, a wagon, a dog, a late step, made his throat tighten. Suspicion moved through him into another emotion, irritation edged with fear. He snapped a leather strap into place where tools hung, making noise to mark the hour. At midnight he rose and met Alden at the lane. They walked under low roofs, passing dry eaves and drain spouts. The scrape marks by each threshold told a consistent story. A prowler had moved house to house, avoiding open doors, pushing straw aside with a careful hand. Tom's eyes caught a new scrape that turned toward the mill. Alden bent and traced the scrape with his walking stick, then said, "This wasn't tea theft for sale." See how they left the charms together under boards once they reached the mill. That is not a thief taking for profit. That is someone collecting with care. Tom's mouth opened. "Collecting," he said. They split their lamps along the cobbles and moved faster, following the marks to the old mill. A thin wind carried the creak of the mill wheel, even though it moved only when water pushed it. The lane smelled of wet grain and old wood. The loose planks near the foundation gave when Alden tested them. Tom pushed and the board shifted, revealing a shallow cavity. They pried the boards aside and found a bundle of charms tucked beneath hay and rags. Some charms were whole, some were split and tied together by small cords. The arrangement looked deliberate. Charms placed in stacks and some threaded on a thicker cord. Tom crouched and touched one. The bronze was warm from a man's hands, not old hands. He pulled back when he felt the smudge of ash on his fingers. A sound came from the yard, a trembling breath, the rustle of cloth. A figure moved on the other side of the mill, and then stepped into the dim. Elspeth stood there, small and ragged, the hem of her gown wet with mud. Her hands were raw. Her eyes were red and sharp. "Elspeth," Marta stepping forward, "why are these under the mill?" The question was flat, abrupt, and charged. Elspeth's reply came as a quick rush. "I've been taking them because he is dying," she said. "My Liesel coughs until the milk comes thin. I knotted them together to make one cord. I thought the abbess' blessing would hold him." Her hands trembled as she reached for the heap. The air changed. Accusation returned like a gust. Brandt's voice, carried somehow, cut through the yard. "You took them. You took from Marta." He came forward into the lamplight, face red. Elspeth stepped back. "Yes, I took them," she said. "I bound them. I tried to make a cord strong enough. I did not mean to steal for myself. I meant to bind them for Liesel so the fever would stop." Her words came fast and raw. She looked at Marta and then at Alden. Marta's hands closed into fists. Her nails left marks in the palm as she held them. "Elspeth," she said, voice low, "why not ask? You knew we would share." The sentence contained an edge. Her eyes moved to the pile. Alden put himself between Marta and Elspeth. He traced a bead on his rosary and said, "We will not strike one another. Elspeth, you must come with us to the abbey tomorrow. We will ask for a blessing. For tonight, return what you can." His voice was even, but his eyes were hard. Elspeth swayed. "They will not give it. They will say I stole. They will laugh. I cannot go there with Liesel weak." She pressed both hands to her chest as if the sickness might take her right then. Tears showed at her eyelids. Tom moved closer. "Elspeth," he said, short and clear, "who tied them here? Did anyone help you?" She blinked and then named a man who had been seen near the lane and who sometimes carried a crate of pots to market. The name came out like a small, surprised sound. Marta's anger shifted in quick motion, from hot accusation to a tight, hard disappointment. She spoke only 2 sentences. "Why would anyone help?" she said, to hide kindness into shame. Her hands worked at the cord on a fallen charm, tying a new knot with practiced movement. Alden moved with a decision. "We will gather the charms tonight and return them. We will not make this a theft case unless there is malice. If someone helped Elspeth, they must come forward." He looked at Tom. "Tom, help me watch the yard. Marta, mend what you can. Bring the rest to the common room." He spoke plainly. Tom and Alden lifted the pile. The charms felt like cold coins. Tom noticed that several charms bore the same small scratch along the edge, the same mark he had seen on his own broken piece. It was a shared cut, not random, made with a small sharp blade. He kept that detail in his mind. On the way back, Elspeth's weakness showed. She stumbled at a gatepost and Alden supported her arm. Her breath came in shallow pulls. Who binds a cord for a child with others' charms? She asked, voice thin, someone who has no coin for a priest's blessing, martyr, someone who knows only that charms might be strong when bound. But you should have come to the door. Her tone was still steady and practical. The anger had folded into a tight resolve. They returned to the cottage and set the charms on the table. Neighbors watched as Alden explained. Elspeth folded at the hearth, hands clasped, and put her face into them. People moved around her with small motions. One brought broth, another a shawl. The rapid movement of help shifted the mood again from suspicion to an odd, cautious pity. Brant spoke low. If she wanted blessing, why hide? Marta answered without looking at him. Because shame sits heavy on the ragged. Because begging brings scorn. Because she feared the abbey's coin. The sentence was concrete. It named an action and a cause. Alden took the charms and spoke into the hush. We will return them to those they belong to. We will go to the abbey in the morning. For now, we mend what we can and keep watch. He assigned pairs for watch and then turned to Tum. You will sleep at the workshop tonight. Tum. Keep the lamp low and the door latched. If anything moves, call out. Tum nodded and answered, yes, Brother Alden. The reply was a short, steady line. They worked in pairs. Marta stitched cracked loops, threading a doubled cord and knotting small overhand knots. Tom tied a repaired charm and then paused when he saw how small the new knots looked against his collused fingers. He felt a second shift in emotion. The tight suspicion of earlier softened into a protective care. He mended with deliberate hands. Halfway through mending, a sharp noise came from the lane. The clang of a pail dropped in the dark. A neighbor at the door called out. Everyone froze. For a moment a sharp, quick fear returned so that breaths stopped. Then Alden stepped out, lamp held forward. He listened at the lane, and after a long breath returned to say, it was only Brant's boy, late for his cause. The event broke the tension in small pieces. They tied the last of the charms and placed them in small cloth pouches. Alden knotted a thick cord through several and said, we will take these to each home at first light. We will not make this a punishment tonight. Marta's jaw loosened one notch. She lifted one pouch and pressed it into Elspeth's hands. Keep Liesel warm, she said. Elspeth looked up. Marta, she said, quick and childish. I am sorry. The word came out simple and immediate. Marta's face did not shift into forgiveness with a flourish. She nodded and said, then show it. Help me mend the rest. Stay by the fire. The exchange was small and concrete. Before dawn, Tom walked the lane with Alden once more to retrace the tracks. The scrape marks ended at the mill and not beyond. Tom ran his fingers along the wet straw and found a thin thread stuck to the broken bronze, linen fibers that matched the hem of Elspeth's gown. He kept quiet and folded the thread into his palm. They returned and sat with the last embers of the hearth. Tom could not rest. He thought of the scratch on the bronze, the way boards had been lifted with careful hands, and Elspeth's raw, pleading explanation. His emotions shifted a final time. From suspicion to anger, then to pity, and finally to a guarded resolve to protect both the village and the weak among them. Alden rose and spoke one firm sentence. Tomorrow we walk to the abbey together. He paused and looked to each in turn. We will ask for blessing and for counsel. We will ask the abbess to name a way to make this right without shaming a woman with a child. The sentence carried an action plan. They left Elspeth with a bowl of broth and a thick blanket. Marta went to mend straps while Tom packed his small kit for the night at the workshop. He checked the latch and set the lamp low on the bench. Before he rolled his blanket, he put the thin linen fiber against the split charm and tied them together with a twin knot. It was a small act and a concrete redress. A knock sounded at the lane door as Tom reached for the cord. He unlatched and opened. A single neighbor stood with a torch, breath puffing in the cold air. He held out a face that was set with a new line. "There is someone at the Abbey," the neighbor said. "They ask to speak with Brother Alden. They bring a scrap of cloth like this." He held up a small strip of linen that matched the fiber Tom had kept. Tom looked past him toward the dim cottages and then down at the tied charm in his hand. The final sentence of the chapter closes on a concrete beat. Alden's lamp moved toward the door as he stepped outside, rosary in hand, and the three walked together toward the mill road, following a new lead that would change what they thought they had found. Marta climbed the narrow ladder inside the bell tower and stopped when the rope would not slide free. A bronze charm hung from the clapper, its cord split and frayed. Suspicion tightened Marta's hands around the rope where she held it. Suspicion had been the slow, steady ache in her chest since the charm had split on her own threshold days before. She pressed her palm to the torn cord and found scrape marks in the straw at the tower step, fresh and uneven. The discovery made the problem immediate. Someone had interfered with the bell and left a charm on the metal, and that meant the thefts were not random nuisance, but a directed pattern. Within minutes, Brother Alden reached the top, lamp in hand, and Marta heard his breath scrape through the tower. Marta kept her voice low but clear. "Brother Alden, look," she pointed. Alden moved close, fingers steady on the lamp, and his eyes traced the cord. "The knot is pulled outward, Alden. The rope has been worked from the bell side." Marta felt the tug of practical fear, not panic, but a pressure that made her set her jaw and count steps. She thought of the bronze charm split on her own doorstep, of the straw disturbed in the lane, of Tom waking to the sound of heavy soles and a lamp nearly knocked over. Each detail fit together now in a line that ran through the village like a mark on wood. Marta climbed down with the charm wrapped in cloth, and they passed a pair of footprints on the tower base. Longer than a child, airs and muddied with the same dark clay that tracked to the longhouse lane. Her suspicion shifted into calculation. She kept her hands steady. She wanted to name what she felt, yet she showed it by action. She tied the torn cord into a small bundle and carried it like evidence. "Marta, Brother Alden, you saw this first." Marta answered with the single motion of the bundle in both hands. They followed the footprints together and called for Tom where the lane narrowed between the houses. Tom arrived with a cloth, wrapped bundle under his arm and his face still raw from being roused earlier. He moved his hands as he listened, and Marta watched him watch the lane as if trying to read the mud. "Tom, Marta, did you hear anything else tonight?" He nodded and pointed back toward the workshop. "I heard a drag, Marta, near the Coopers. It stopped by the bell steps." Tom's voice was quick. He fidgeted with the whistle at his throat. The whistle had become a small object of trust for villagers and an anchor for Tom's posture. They inspected the tower step together. Brother Alden crouched and ran his thumb along the scrape in the dried straw. "This scrape is fresh, Alden, not from the wind." Marta felt her suspicion deepen into a sharper edge. She had already blamed rough hands. Now she had a path and a purpose in front of her. If someone hampered the bell, they meant to silence an alarm. The sentence landed like an order. They all felt the implication. Someone had learned which noises mattered and had tried to stop them. They walked the trail toward the row of long houses. Tom moved ahead and then back like a boy measuring his courage. Marta kept scanning thresholds, checking for cords and missing trinkets in the half-light. The village smelled of wet straw and the last ember smoke from hearths. She counted doors with a steady hand. Every threshold had a small protection cord or charm tied above it, and several places showed empty pegs where charms had once hung. Marta's doubt flickered through her. Could a neighbor take their own charm to save someone, or was this theft for darker intent? They stopped at a longhouse where neighbors had gathered. A woman named Magda pointed toward the lane and kept scrubbing at her sleeves with her palms. "Marta," she said, "we found the cord at my door undone this morning." The words pushed Marta to act. She folded her hands and made a plan aloud. "Brother Alden will keep watch in the chapel. Tom will sleep near the workshop door. I will sit by the longhouse threshold tonight." The plan was small and direct, the kind of response that would not fix everything, but it would put bodies where theft might occur. They arranged themselves in the longhouse common room, the high wooden table between them carrying a pot of thin broth. Marta tightened her apron, fingers moving to the worn leather at her waist because movement steadied her. Tom unrolled his cloth bundle and set his head on a rolled sack by the workshop doorway. Brother Alden placed his lamp on a shelf and adjusted the wick. The three of them sat with a shared purpose, each decision a defense. Marta in a low voice, "We watch the thresholds. We do not chase into the mist alone." Her words were practical, not pleading. Action now would determine what happened. For a while the night measured itself in small sounds. Tom's breathing evened. Marta chewed a piece of bread and listened to the longhouse settle. Brother Alden traced his rosary beads and hummed a low prayer. The tension remained like a held breath. Then Marta noticed the whistle lying by the tower threshold where they had earlier examined the bell, Tom's whistle. She picked it up with 2 fingers and felt the varnish worn at the mouthpiece. Marta's hands tightened around the whistle. The sight shifted her suspicion toward Tom in an instant. She felt that pull of doubt again, sudden and precise. She did not speak the suspicion yet. Instead, she walked back to the longhouse lane and called, "Tom, whose whistle did you say that was?" Tom sat up and blinked, afraid at the implication in her voice. "Marta, it's mine. I lost it last week, and I found it by the tower when I checked the steps earlier," he said. He kept his sentences brief. Marta's doubt did not fade. She saw a smear of dark clay on Tom's sleeve, where his hand had brushed his forearm while he slept. Magda pointed at it under the lamplight, and her tone carried accusation like a stone. "Tom, Magda, your sleeve is marked like the footprints." Now the emotion rotated again. Suspicion had become accusation, and accusation opened a new vulnerability in Tom. He stammered, "I did not take anything. Marta, I found a charm in the lane, and I put it in my bundle because I feared being accused." His voice rose small and quick. Brother Alden hushed him, and Marta watched Tom's hands as he pushed at the bundle's cloth. The movement said more than his words. He wanted to protect himself, but he also hid something. "Marta, show me the bundle." Tom hesitated and then untied the knot, fingers shaking. He withdrew a bronze charm the size of a coin, darkened with soot and folded in the cloth. "I found this, Marta." "Tom, I hid it because I thought if I handed it to the woman at the east door, they would reckon me thief." Brother Alden took the charm and held it close to the lamp. He turned it under the light and frowned. "This soot is not like hearth smoke, Alden." He tapped the edge and a smear of black came away, but the black smelled faintly of something else, burned resin or candle wax forced to burn old wood. "Someone has singed this," Alden added, "not to burn it but to change its look." Marta felt doubt shift again into concern. She sat back and rubbed her thumb along the thread of her apron. Tom's shoulders bowed under the weight of blame and relief in the same moment. He had hidden the charm to avoid being blamed, and now the hiding itself made him look guilty. Marta's decisions tightened. She could press Tom and risk a fracture in trust, or she could follow the new trail the suit suggested. They followed a faint path beyond the cottages, deeper into the row of longhouses where boards had warped with damp. Marta felt the village's expectation weigh on her. She moved the loose board under the longhouse gently, then wedged her elbow and pried. A shape shifted in the dark, and she heard straw scrape. Tom crouched to help, and Brother Alden braced the lamp. When they lifted the boards, a shallow hollow came free, and inside a bundle of charms lay heaped around a small straw bed and a folded child's shawl. The sight altered Marta's mind at once. The heap of charms looked like a child's ruined treasure, not a stolen hoard. Marta felt a new emotion arrive. Pity mingled with alarm. Her suspicion loosened, and the urge to protect took its place. She reached toward the child's shawl and touched the folded wool. The shawl smelled faintly of smoke and of milk. Someone had kept it close to a child's face. A scrape behind them made all three stiffen. Shadows moved along the longhouse edge. Marta's skin went cold in a practical way, not with metaphor, but with the concrete sting of danger. A hand reached into the hollow and snatched toward the pile. A candle guttered. The figure lunged in a motion nearly animal. A flicker of flame seared a wrist and left a dark burn as the hand came back toward the light. "Hold!" Marta, and the single word made Tom lunge forward. Brother Alden pressed his staff between their bodies, and the returning figure faltered, where the three of them formed a ring. The figure's breath was ragged and the hand reached again, this time clumsy and clinging to a charm that smoldered at its edge. "Leave it, Marta," and the voice she used was not kind nor cruel. It carried the weight of the work she had done her whole life, to keep people safe. The three of them managed the figure roughly. Tom gripped an arm and Brother Alden caught the shoulders. Marta put a knee at the figure's back and pushed. The candle rolled and went out. In the dark the figure spat and tried to curl around the charms. Then the lamp light caught a face. Not a man at all, but an older woman, hair pulled into a rough knot, eyes wide and wet, a smear of ash along her cheek. Her wrist bore a shallow burn that had blistered and darkened. She did not speak at first. She pressed her lips together and shook. "Who are you?" "Marta." The question was blunt. She needed an answer to know whether this was a thief or a desperate neighbor. The woman gasped and then said in a broken voice, "Child. I keep her safe. I took the charms so she would sleep without crying." Her words were small and raw. Marta felt the ground shift under what she had assumed. The stolen charms were not trophies, but an attempt to build a buffer for a hidden child. Tom's grip loosened. He looked at Marta with a quick pleading. "Marta, could she be hiding a child?" he asked. The simple line moved Marta to action. She slid a hand into the hollow and peeled back straw. There was a small breathing sound under the shawl, the quick, irregular inhale of a child too small for the longhouse world. Brother Alden reached with care and pulled the shawl aside. A child's face blinked up with half-closed eyes and a cough that carried soot in it. Everything in Marta rearranged then. Her suspicion, her doubt, her sharpness, all of it folded into care. She wiped the child's nose with the edge of her apron and felt the child's tiny shoulder tremble. "Marta." Brother Alden quietly, "She is singed. She has been near fire." Marta blinked heat from her own eyes and forced herself to move with practical tasks. She Tom to fetch clean straw and a warm bowl of water. Tom ran. The older woman pressed her good hand to her face and shook slowly. When Marta looked at the woman's wrist, she saw the burns had been recent and not tended. The woman's fingers clenched around the charms as if they were talismans that might keep the child from more harm. Questions rose fast then. "Where did you find the child?" "Marta." The woman swallowed. "By the back of the granary," she said. "A cart caught fire. I took her and hid her. I cannot bring her to the hall. They will take her if they see soot and no kin." The woman's voice was low and rough with sobbing. Marta had no law to pass and no right to pry. She had only decisions to make. The emotional shift completed itself from suspicion to responsibility. Marta set the child's head on folded cloth and began to unwrap the shawl. Brother Alden bent his prayer book back into his hands and then put it down. "Marta," he said, "we cannot leave her here alone. If the woman moves this child again, they risk more burns or discovery." Marta considered. She thought of the way the village slept now and of the stolen charms tied together under the floor. "We will not hand the child to the hall this hour, Marta. We will keep watch, and we will mend what we can for now." Her decisions were concrete and carried consequence. She had moved from suspicion to making a protective plan. The woman whispered, I singed the charms to hide markings. I thought if they looked old, they would not be traced. I could not bear to put her by a cold peg without anything. Her voice broke, Marca's jaw tightened. The woman's motive pivoted the whole case from theft to sheltering. Marta felt both pity and a simmering alarm. Someone was willing to break the village's small protections to hide a child, and that exposed them all. Name yourself. Tell us your name. The woman hesitated and then said, I am called Edo in the stitches. I keep my work to myself. I have no kin. The name fit the sound of the hands that mended and the habit of folding small things into pockets. A short argument rose then between Magda and Tom in quick lines of speech. Magda, she hid it. She hid the child, Tom. She burned her hand, saving the child. Magda, we cannot shelter lawbreakers. Tom, we cannot hand over a singed child to judge right now. They traded 3 rapid lines that hashed danger and mercy. Marta listened and then cut the exchange with a single command. We decide now. Brother Alden tends the child. I will watch thresholds tonight with Tom. Eda stays in the hollow until dawn. No one moves alone. The decision balanced caution and compassion. They set to work with the practical, unromantic tasks that settled fear. Brother Alden warmed a bowl and bathed the child's face. Marta fetched clean straw and baked bread warmed over the last embers. Tom fetched a strip of linen to bind Eda's wrist with cold water on it to keep it from blistering. They tied charms above the nearest thresholds with knots that would show tampering if disturbed. With each action, the story of the thefts changed shape. What had looked like deliberate sabotage now had the outline of a protective theft, an act taken to keep a child from worse harm. In the hollow they counted charms. Dozens lay in a careful pile, not scattered in greed, but placed as if someone had been making a small bed of talismans. Marta set them between palms and checked for names or pegs that would match. Several were singed, a few were bent. When Brother Alden brought the child toward the lamp, Marta saw the child's eyes open wide and then close with a soft sound. The lamp light caught the child's breathing and the smell of milk on the shawl. Tom watched and his shoulders loosened. The earlier accusation had become a vow to keep watch. At that moment a shadowed figure moved in the lane and a hand knocked once at the longhouse door. The knock was a single, quiet sound that made the 3 of them still. Marta rose and looked at Brother Alden. He nodded. She crossed the room and opened the door a narrow crack. A man stood there with a basket in one arm, his face plain and sober beneath a hood. Marta, I heard a lamp. I bring bread. His voice was low and practical. Marta stepped back and let him in. The knock became the new beat. A neighbor delivering bread and also bearing witness. The external event centered the longhouse to the village and forced the trio to move from private discovery to community action. They explained nothing to the man. Actions carried the meaning. He set the basket down and his eyes flicked to the hollow as if he guessed. He fetched another strip of linen and then, without words, offered it to Brother Alden. The man's simple help shifted the mood from hidden things to shared duty. By dawn the village would learn some facts. For now the longhouse held a secret and a new, fragile alliance. Marta tied a fresh cord above the longhouse threshold and threaded a small bronze charm onto it, a replacement for one that had been taken. Her fingers moved with the care of someone who had always kept thresholds. She nothing of justice or judgment. She knotted and then tested the loop with 2 fingers. The knot held firm. Tom set 2 small stones at the step to mark the watch, and Brother Alden arranged a place near the hearth for Eda to sit while the child slept in straw warmed by the lamp. Before dawn, the shadowed woman, Eda, moved toward the hollow and tried to retrieve the pile. The 3 of them rose together and met her steps. Marta put a hand on Eda's shoulder and guided her to sit. Eda, Marta, and her voice had the flatness of someone who must be clear. You kept the child. You singed charms to hide them. We will watch the child together. You will not move alone. The woman nodded and let her body slump. She did not try to flee. The risk had been met, and the urgency had changed into a new, careful wariness. Brother Alden took the charred charm that Edda had carried and set it on the table. He blessed the small thing in a soft, practical way and then passed a bowl of warm milk to the child. Tom sat by the doorway and listened for the lane. Marta felt the village returning to its ordinary patterns while carrying a new knot of care inside it. She had started the night suspecting theft and ended it with a secret saved and a child sheltered beneath their feet. Her choices had moved the people around her, from suspicion to protection, from accusation to shared duty. When the first pale light touched the lane, and the longhouse boards warmed a degree, Marta stood at the threshold and tested the knot she had tied the night before. It sat taut and small above the door, a practical promise. Tom yawned and reached for his cloth bundle. Brother Alden cradled the child and hummed a low, steady line that helped the child sleep on. Edda sat with her hands folded, the burn dressing damp at her wrist. Marta threaded a fresh bronze charm onto a new cord, knotted it, and pushed the loop through the peg above the door. She tied the final knot and pinched it until it was tight. The action was ordinary, but it sealed a decision. Thresholds in the village would no longer be the only protection. People would watch one another's thresholds together. As the longhouse door closed softly and the lane filled with the first household calls, Marta felt the final movement of the night settle into a single, concrete beat. She hammered a small peg into the lintel and set the newly knotted charm in place, listening for the sound of wood taking the nail. The hammer sank home with a soft click and the charm settled into its new peg. Marta stepped back and watched Tom and Brother Alden share a look. She nothing lofty. She breathed once and tightened the strap of her leather apron. The child in Brother Alden's arms shifted and coughed, then slept. Outside, someone began to sweep the lane. Inside, the longhouse moved into the day's tasks with a new, careful rhythm. Marta felt the last of the night's suspicion drain away into work and watchfulness. She closed the door fully, the charm fixed above it, and the three of them began to plan the watches for the coming nights. Marta's final action before she sat was to knot a short piece of cord onto the inside peg and tuck the singed charm Edda had left beneath it. She did this without speech. It was a concrete sealing of the night's events. The peg held the charm, the child slept, and the village would wake to learn some of what had happened. Marta settled at the table, folded her hands, and listened to Brother Alden breathe next to the lamp. The night's conflict had resolved into a set of duties they all agreed to carry. The decision was visible in the tied cords and in the gentle watch that would continue until dawn fully broke.